This is a guide on how to ride a dragon and a song of ice and fire. To be able to ride a dragon, you have to know the techniques it takes to tame one. For this, we have to go to old Valyria. A long time ago in Essos, there were shepherds with pale skin, purple and bluish eyes, along with silver and blondish hair. They were unremarkable, and even bullied by the other people of Essos, until one day they came across dragons. There are multiple tales on how these humble people came across such beasts. One states they simply stumbled across them in the 14 flames, a ring of 14 volcanoes. This could be true since we know dragons like to rest around areas of extremely high heat. Some say the shadow people introduced dragons to the shepherds and taught them the magic needed to tame them. That seems less likely and more like a tale to give Asoif people credit for the Valyrian uprising. Some even say that Valyrians experimented on wyverns and themselves to create dragons and to be able to control them. This could explain Valyrians' pale skin and white hair being the way it is since they live in an extremely hot tropical environment. It naturally would make more sense if they had darker skin and hair. It also could explain why Targaryens were explained to have blood of the dragon and why they often thought of themselves as gods. Of course, this is all speculation, but nonetheless, Valyrians had dragons. Which leads us to the first tool you might need to ride one: horns and spells. Most Valyrian magic included blood sacrifices and/or death. There's a reason why the Valyrian culture is built upon the words fire and blood. Their control of the dragons was structured around the use of magic, which also likely connected their minds and bodies with the dragons as well. We do know the Valyrians had slaves and they bred them with animals to make monstrous hybrids, so it wouldn't be surprising if they used some form of blood magic on themselves to mix or create what we know now as dragons. That being said, you likely won't have to mix your DNA with a dragon or wyvern. All you have to do is be lucky enough to be born high Valyrian. See, in old Valyria, there were many families that weren't actually dragon riders. The nobility that mostly ruled over Valyria were made up of 40 families. Those 40 families essentially ruled over Valyria because of a simple fact: dragons. Mind you, this ancient city was massive, spanning over much of Essos, so there were likely many Valyrians that weren't considered dragon riders and many families that weren't of nobility. But you may not have to be so lucky after all. It seems likely that any Valyrian, not just the dragon lords, could tame a dragon. Issue would have been accessibility. Even back before the doom of Valyria, when there was hundreds of dragons, riding one would still be a commodity. So the poorer houses like the Valyrians, or better yet, Celticars, just didn't have enough influence or political power to own any dragons. But they probably still had the ability to tame and ride them. They just weren't allowed to. The Valyrians don't describe themselves as dragon riders, but this is a fool's distinction. There's no doubt those Targaryens wisely withheld all access to dragons as soon as they reached Dragonstone. So House Valyrian wouldn't have ever even had the chance to ride such a beast. Look at what happens when Adam Valyrian, a dragon seed and thus a dragon rider, also likely the son of Corlys Valyrian, attempts to tame the dragon Seasmoke. Corlys Valyrian himself claims we're not a house of dragon riders, yet his bastard claimed a dragon before his very eyes. Besides that, we know Targaryens married members of House Valyrian somewhat frequently, since Aegon the Conqueror's mother was a Valyrian, which she herself was half Targaryen. As if Nettles, a brown bastard girl, has more dragon blood than a Valyrian. Ideally, you would have the blood of old Valyria in some form, either from a high or low house, but even that's questionable. Nettles, who stated previously was a bastard-born brown girl, is able to tame the ugly dragon Sheepstealer while she had no Targaryen physical traits. We don't know for certain if she was actually a Targaryen or not through a bastard line just because of how she looked. For instance, Baelor Breakspear, who we know was Targaryen and the Prince of the Iron Throne, had dark hair and skin and no purple or bluish eyes. So it's entirely possible to be a Targaryen and not have these physical traits. This could just be the case for Nettles, but a lot of Targaryens have had bastard children, especially on Dragonstone, so anyone could say. What really matters when it comes to bonding with your dragon is how you approach it. While being Valyrian helps, Being confident and sure of yourself is extremely important so that you don't get eaten. Quentin Martell had Targaryen blood but was still burned alive by one of Dany's dragons. Daenerys herself was going to be killed by the vicious beast Drogon in the pits, but the only way she escaped with her life is by being brave and striking the monster with a whip. If she tried to run, surely she'd be eaten. Aemon, when bonding with Vhagar, was extremely brave and strong, and the she-beast Vhagar just lost her rider and was an especially fierce dragon. Valyrians typically got around this problem of risking getting killed from the bonding process by bonding their dragons early, before they could eat them. This was done by putting a dragon's egg with a baby in its cradle waiting for it to hatch, preying on it, and heating it hoping it wouldn't turn to stone. This confirms that even purebloods can be killed when trying to bond with a dragon. The beast often had to be kept around people to get used to them, and that made it easy to bond with a dragon and also made them more tame when you did. The cannibal was a large wild dragon that no Targaryen tried to bond with. It seems like a power-hungry Targaryen would jump at the opportunity to tame a dragon like the cannibal, but they knew it would mean certain death. But I doubt you're that confident. So the next best thing would be to gain the trust of said dragon, like how Nettles did by leaving out sheep for her dragon to feed on. There aren't any other recorded examples of this to my knowledge, so if you have a questionable heritage, I would try this method first. Of course, there is another method you could try, and that would be magic. Some say it's possible that Nettles, among others, did some blood magic to be able to tame the dragons. Recall the old Valyrian dragon lords and their use of horns and blood magic to control their weapons of mass destruction. Euron Greyjoy seemed to acquire one of these methods, which I'm not surprised he's madder than them all. What I'm referring to is an old Valyrian horn. The one Euron has is called Dragonbinder. Trust me, this isn't some trick or mummer's magic. The horn Euron has is proven to work, or at least have some magical properties. The poor fool who blew into the horn had burnt lips and lungs as black as soot, and the people who heard the cry of the horn said it sounded like thousands of people screaming. As I'm sure you could tell, the man who played the horn died, but you don't have to play it to reap the effects of obtaining a dragon. The dragon comes to whoever is the master of the horn, whoever claims it. Maybe the actual sound of the horns to just attract the dragon in the first place. Well, then the next question would be how to master the horn. And if you were paying any attention at all, then you would know the answer: blood. Assuming that you're actually able to bond and sit atop the beast, then you have to understand that you now have a deep connection with the animal. Dragons are intelligent creatures. Queen Alysanne's dragon Silverwing dared not go past the northern wall, no matter how many times she told it to. And it's been said dragons have an emotional telekinesis of some sort with its rider. How else would it know if its riders died, and thus allowing it to let someone else ride it? Furthermore, while intelligent, you have to understand that they're still beast. When guiding your dragon with a whip, the dragon will go in the direction you hit them, unlike a horse which will run away from pain and or danger, or the loud cracking of the whip. A dragon will dominate anything it sees as a threat and seek it out. Because of this fierceness, one would be smart to keep its mount well fed. Trying to control an animal that is fed and has nothing on its mind is easier than an animal who needs a meal. Of course, another way to ease this is by speaking the great language of High Valyrian, so naturally, one would have to learn the commands. All of these rules and principles have been used by the great dragon lords of old Valyria, and while you're lowborn, you can hope that these methods work for you. Or be eaten. I don't really care. Just realize that with these monsters, you'll have all you'll need to conquer the Western, Eastern, and unknown world. Most of these facts and concepts came from Fire and Blood, so if you're interested in the book, then check out my link down below. It helps out the channel and you'll get something pretty interesting and fun to read. Alright, see ya.